Now, pretty much every single hero shooter ever made, whether it's Overwatch, Marvel Rivals, Deadlock, basically tells you the same thing. Counterplay means picking the right hero. Well, Deadlock is the first one that figured out that that might actually be the wrong answer. Today, I'm going to be talking about the counterplay issue in Marvel Rivals and compare it to maybe a game like Deadlock. But anyways, let's dive straight in. So let's talk about the problem that I see. Now, here's how counterplay works in Marvel Rivals. Before the match starts, you pick your hero based on what the enemy's running. You decide, do I swap? Do I hard counter? Maybe you adjust at the hero select screen before you walk out of spawn. Maybe you don't. Either way, that decision is locked in before the first shot is fired. You realize that who you're playing against, you might actually need to swap, so you just go back in the swamp and keep swapping the heroes. But the issue with that is that once you're in, your options are play better mechanically, hope your team's comp lines up, or just accept it. There's not really a system that lets you respond to a problem that's actually developing, like items, for example. Of course, you can go back to spawn and swap your character, but that's not saying much. You're solving the game before the game actually starts. There's not really counterplay. That's honestly like a rock, paper, scissors with better graphics, for example. Now, for example, if you take Hawkeye, if an enemy Hawkeye is one-tapping your backline every 8 seconds, what do? Don't be in his line of sight? Okay, now you're not playing your role. You pick a dive hero, cool, you're swapping your entire game plan at the start of the next round or when you're leaving spawn. You can't necessarily buy a defensive item mid-fight. There's nothing to buy. You don't have that option. You never had that option in the first place to begin with. Now, I think the fix or solution, or the thing that's cool that what is different between Deadlock and Marvel Rivals is that, yes, Deadlock is a MOBA. I mean, it's obvious. It's plainly obvious, right? You're doing waves, you're doing creeps, you're buying items, and so on. Deadlock gives you a shot, and I know that sounds basic. MOBA players have had this forever, but in a hero shooter context, this honestly changes everything. You're 12 minutes into a match, enemy in Furnace is stacking lifesteal, and you cannot burst them down fast enough. In Marvel Rivals, you're waiting for the round end or something else to shift. And in Deadlock, you open the shop and buy Decay, or you buy anything with Shred, his regen by 40%, and so on. And now suddenly that fight looks completely different. You didn't swap heroes, you didn't swap team compositions, you didn't do this or that. You read what was happening and you responded to it. Although it is a little bit different between the two because in Deadlock, you're locked into a character, whilst in Rivals, you have the option to be swapping and countering each other throughout the entire match. But it does come to a point where it gets pretty annoying to do that. Or for example, an enemy has a Kelvin running point blank freezes on your carry, debuff reducer cuts the duration, getting kited by a range hero you can't close the gap on, slowing Hex, the enemy team is stacking arrows, sharpshooter. Every single problem that develops in that game has an end game answer that you can buy or that you can just flat out counterplay with mechanically, advantage. Now, I think the cool thing in Deadlock is the meta doesn't just exist between patches, it exists within every match. That's the difference because you might get different characters that aren't typically meta in quotations, so you're changing up what you're buying, what you're counter buying, and so on. Whereas Marvel Rivals has had probably the same exact meta for a few seasons now. So there is a rather large difference. And if you're watching this and you've been sleepy on Deadlock, make sure to drop a sub. I've got tier lists, ranked guides, and a lot more coming this month. But anyways, back to it. Now, if you're still not 100% sure or on page of what I'm rambling on about, I just want to talk about some examples or the evidence. In practice, 3 scenarios, the same problem, different games. And then you can see how exactly these are different between one another. The first one is scenario 1. You're playing tank in Marvel Rivals, for example. The enemy team has 2 burst damage dealers and they're shredding you in under a couple seconds every single engage. What do? Do you play around pillars? Do you coordinate your team's shields? Hope your supports pocket you harder? None of these are decisions you're actually making because they're reactions to a system you can't necessarily change because you're just going to be constantly getting dived. And if your supports don't have the same amount of skill, it's not the best. I would say Marvel Rivals takes a lot more team-oriented skill than Deadlock, for example. There is some instances where team-oriented fights are very important in Deadlock, but you're not getting the same until you get to the upper ranks or even in pro play. Where in Deadlock, you have options, you have items you can buy to save yourself and try to carry the game yourself. You don't really get that in Rivals. 9 out of 10 times, the game is just ult-oriented. There isn't really any fights in the neutral, and you're mainly just looking for who has what ultimates, when, and where. That's scenario one. Then you have scenario two, where let's say Overwatch 2, the other, big hero shooter in the mix right now. An Ana nade lands on you, you're anti-healed, you run away and wait it out. That's your entire counterplay, timer-based, super passive. Whereas in Deadlock, you get hit with something that's disrupting your healing. You already bought Rescue Beam or your team support 2 minutes ago in anticipation. That was a forward decision. That was rewarding the enemy's build and preemptively countering it. This is a higher form of gameplay than anything hero shooters have ever asked of their players. Then you have your last scenario, scenario 3. And this is one that matters the most. You're losing in Marvel Rivals. The enemy team is just better coordinated. You have no adjustments left. You played your heroes correctly. Your positioning is fine, but you're just being out coordinated and there's nothing left to pull. The game was decided 5 minutes ago. Whereas in Deadlock, you're never out of adjustments. The item shop is always open. You can always find an edge. That's what I mean when I say Deadlock has a high skill ceiling that hero shooters can't really touch because of the MOBA aspect. Now, what is this guy yapping about? Let me just talk to you about the real argument. So why this matters for competitive players. And I think Deadlock and Marvel Rivals are two prime examples of two drastically different competitive experiences. One has an item shop because it's a MOBA. One is just a normal hero shooter where you have characters with abilities and ultimates. But I think the thing most players or people miss when they talk about what makes a competitive game feel good, it's not necessarily about balance. It's not necessarily about patch cadence. It's more about agency. Agency is the feeling that your decisions matter. That the outcome of a fight is connected to what you did or didn't do in a way that you can learn from and fix. Now, before you type in the comments that saying that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, this is blah, 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 I have a ton of hours in Rivals. I've made tons of content. I have a tons of hours in Deadlock all the way to the beginning of the game when it was first initially released as a invite only, which it still is. And you can just see all the evidence there. But Marvel Rivals doesn't give you that agency. When you die to a Hela that 1 to 2 taps you, the post-mortem is, I was in her line of sight. Same with Phoenix. And same with Angela, or not Angela, Elsa. And that's not necessarily a learning moment. That's honestly a geometry lesson because when you die in Deadlock, the post-mortem is, I didn't build enough resistance, I mistimed my parry, I engaged when their items were up in my Mura cooldown. That's information and that's something you can actually fix. And this is why the ranked climb in Deadlock is, I think, a little bit more addictive in a way that Marvel Rivals stopped being for a lot of players. I would say, including myself. Every loss in Deadlock honestly feels like something you could have changed. Every win feels earned in a way that's specific to the decisions you made in that match. Marvel Rivals is an incredible game for what it is. The IP, I would say some of the characters, the feel, all elite. But it borrowed its competitive design from games that were built in 2016. Deadlock was built from scratch in 2024 by people who asked if the player had more agency. What if Counterplay was a continuous decision, not a pre-game one? The answer to that question is the game we're playing right now, Deadlock. Now, I'm not saying Marvel Rivals is not going anywhere. It's got Marvel IP, quote unquote 30 million players and a developer that's patching it, I would say pretty consistently, giving you characters here and there. But I will say it has a ceiling, and that ceiling is baked into design. When your entire counter system lies in the hero select screen and making sure that your team has a better coordination, you've already decided how deep your competitor ladder can truly go. I would say Deadlock doesn't have that ceiling anywhere close to it, and we don't honestly know where it is because the game isn't even out. And that's what makes it the most interesting competitive game being made right now. Every other hero shooter gives you a hero and says, figure it out, where Deadlock gives you a hero and a shop and says, prove it. Now, I will say, if you're a Marvel Rivals player who's been curious about Deadlock, I've got ranked guides, tier lists, hero breakdowns. All the links are in the description, and I'm trying to post, more content each and every week. And if you disagree with anything I said today, especially you Marvel Rivals diehards, drop it in a comment. Let's actually, talk about something. But anyways, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. This was a little bit of a different video than what I traditionally do. I just wanted to compare and contrast, Deadlock and Marvel Rivals. Not saying that one is better than the other, but both are super fun. Both can still be played. But I think if you want a game that has more mechanical skill, more neutral fights, more fights that actually matter. And if you just want to be better at games in general, I think Deadlock is probably the best option on the market right now. While as Marvel Rivals, although has a large community, lots of skins and stuff, I don't think there's a lot of mechanical or anything demanding of that instance because what I see is in team fights from low ranks to high ranks, it's all about ulting. Ulting is the only way you will win fights, whereas in Deadlock, mechanical skill can actually strive and actually prove something else. But yeah, like I said, I hope you have a good day, and I'll catch you in the next one.